I can pinpoint the exact instant when my world shifted. The office remained unchanged, the gentle whirring of workstations, that unmistakable scent of toner and paper, morning light spilling through blinds and creating amber patterns across my workspace. Yet everything had fundamentally changed. Because the man now addressing us wasn't my employer. He was my employer's heir. And he had just inherited the entire operation. "Good morning, team," he announced, clapping his palms together with the rehearsed enthusiasm of a corporate motivational speaker. "As of today, I'm taking over as CEO." A scattered, hesitant applause followed. I kept my hands still, not out of resentment, at least not yet, but because I already understood what kind of person Marcus Reed was. I had dedicated 17 years to Nexus Digital Solutions. I was there before his father even purchased the property. I had constructed the foundational architecture, authored the core programming that powered the company, designed the proprietary systems, and personally trained every incoming IT specialist. I wasn't merely an employee. I was the foundation. But to Marcus Reed, I was just another face in a sea of dispensable workers. An antiquated remnant from an era he was eager to erase. His father, Edward Reed, couldn't have been more different. Edward was traditional but equitable. He valued loyalty and recognized dedication. Technical expertise wasn't his strong suit, far from it. But he recognized the worth of those who kept operations running smoothly. When his health began to deteriorate, he stepped back and thought he was leaving the company in capable hands. He couldn't have been more mistaken. I observed Marcus as he paraded through the workspace, as if gracing us with his presence, designer attire, meticulously styled hair, jaw clenched with presumptuous determination. He had something to prove, and unfortunately, that meant clearing out the old guard. "We'll be implementing some changes," he announced with an artificial smile. "Modernization. Enhancement. Restructuring, the usual corporate evolution. Some of you may not align with the renewed vision for Nexus Digital." I felt my colleagues' glances turn toward me. They knew Marcus harbored a dislike for me. Not because I'd done anything wrong. Quite the contrary, I had intercepted one of his catastrophic programming attempts during his brief internship. He rarely showed up for work. I prevented the company from experiencing a significant security breach he nearly triggered. I didn't expose him at the time. Perhaps I should have. Later that day, the email arrived, meeting at 4 p.m. CEO's office. Marcus Reed. I remained composed. Not panicking yet. I gathered my documentation and walked calmly into his office. He didn't even acknowledge my entrance. "Olivia," he said coldly. I remained silent as he closed his laptop with a self-satisfied flourish and reclined in his chair. "Olivia, you've been with us for quite some time." "Yes, nearly 2 decades, I replied. He smirked. "Precisely. A considerable time doing, what exactly? Patching outdated code? Babysitting systems?" I maintained my silence. I knew where this conversation was headed. He leaned forward, his tone sharpening. "Let me be direct. I refuse to waste another cent on an obsolete employee. Your services are no longer required." I nodded slowly. My heart raced, but my expression remained impassive. "Understood." Marcus blinked, seemingly surprised I didn't plead or protest. When I didn't, his smirk returned. "Well, at least you're not making a scene." I stood, pushed the chair back carefully, and turned to leave. "Oh, and HR will contact you about severance," he added, almost as an afterthought. I paused at the doorway. "According to the agreement I signed with your father, severance is automatic. You might want to review that contract's specific terms." He appeared confused, but I didn't wait for his response. I walked out, not just from his office, but from the entire building. When I arrived home, I opened my laptop because there was something Marcus didn't know. When Edward promoted me to Chief Systems Architect 3 years earlier, he included a very specific clause in my contract, one Marcus hadn't bothered to read, that gave me control over every internal system, every access point, every security protocol. And if I was ever terminated without just cause, I had the legal right to reset everything. I wasn't vindictive by nature, but Marcus's actions weren't just cruel, they were foolish. Now he would quickly discover what this obsolete employee was actually worth. Sleep eluded me that night. Not because I was upset, I had long ago learned not to take corporate betrayal personally, but because I was preparing. Every system, every line of code, every security protocol I had designed over the years was now at my fingertips. Marcus had no comprehension of what he'd authorized 3 years earlier when Edward elevated me to chief systems architect. I had been explicit with his father. If I'm assuming complete responsibility for every system this company depends on, I need protection. Edward agreed. He trusted me. He valued my contribution. Together with the company's legal department, we crafted a clause that most executives would never permit. If I were ever dismissed without cause or proper severance as outlined in the contract, I had full authority to revoke access, terminate all administrator privileges, and remove proprietary system integrations. In essence, I could reset everything. The clause was embedded midway through the agreement under emergency system governance. I doubted Marcus had read beyond the first page. The following morning I awoke, brushed my hair, brewed some coffee, and settled at my desk with a deep breath. I accessed the remote system dashboard. Every critical platform remained linked to my credentials. Marcus hadn't even reassigned permissions. HR hadn't reached out. No exit interview. No formal handover. He genuinely believed I would simply vanish quietly. I hovered my cursor over the Emergency Protocols tab and clicked. Immediately, a cascade began. Employee portal, deactivated. Payroll access, locked. Internal communication platform, shut down. Client management systems, frozen. Servers, still operational but inaccessible internally. One by one, I watched the company's infrastructure pulse and then dim. I didn't erase anything, that would have been illegal, but per the clause, I had the right to disable access until a legal resolution was reached. It was the nuclear option, designed for worst-case scenarios. This qualified. By noon, my phone was vibrating. Blocked number. Then again. Then a message from someone I hadn't communicated with in months, Tyler, senior IT analyst, "Hey, something's wrong with the network. Everything's going dark. Did you do something? Marcus is losing it." I didn't respond. Minutes later, a call came from the company's reception desk. I ignored it. Then finally, Marcus called. I stared at the screen momentarily. Then I answered, composed as ever. "Olivia speaking." "What have you done?" he barked, abandoning any pretense of civility. I could hear chaos in the background, phones ringing, people shouting, the hollow sound of someone who had completely lost control. "I followed the contract," I said simply. "You should read it sometime." "You've shut down the entire infrastructure," he shouted. "No," I corrected. "I've locked access to it." "There's a significant difference." "You're insane." "No, Marcus. I'm prepared." "You made a decision without understanding the consequences. That responsibility falls on you." I could hear him pacing now. He was furious, but beneath that, he was frightened. He didn't comprehend how the systems functioned. He thought terminating me was merely crossing off a name. He never realized how much I had constructed. "How do I fix this?" he asked. His voice remained sharp but quieter now. "You don't," I replied. "You lack authorization to implement changes." A lengthy silence followed, then quietly, "So what are your demands?" I could have requested money. I could have demanded an enormous settlement, or an apology, or even my position back. But none of that mattered anymore. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about dignity. "I want you to publicly acknowledge your mistake," I said. "Not just to me. To your team. To your board. To everyone who witnessed you dismantle a company you weren't prepared to lead." He laughed bitterly. "You expect me to humiliate myself over this?" I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "I think you've run out of options." Then I disconnected. I spent the remainder of the day answering messages from former colleagues. Some were astonished. Others were quietly supporting me. They had anticipated the fallout the moment Marcus took charge. But none of them knew what would follow, because Marcus had just committed the greatest blunder of his brief career. And within days, he would be desperately seeking assistance. 2 days. That's all it took for chaos to engulf Nexus Digital like wildfire. The systems I had secured weren't merely conveniences. They were the company's central nervous system. Payroll failed to process. Client accounts became inaccessible. Customer service couldn't respond to support tickets. Even the office coffee machine was malfunctioning because it operated on the same cloud-linked administrative panel I had architected. By the third morning, I received a text, "Board called an emergency session today. Marcus is in trouble. Thought you'd want to know." No signature, but I had a good guess. Tyler, perhaps. Or someone from accounting. I had quietly earned the respect of more colleagues than Marcus ever realized. Meanwhile, I had returned to freelance consulting, my own clients, my own schedule. My tranquility. But despite my attempts to ignore it, part of me continued monitoring news alerts and company chatter. This wasn't solely about justice anymore. This was about watching a monument to arrogance crumble brick by brick. Later that afternoon, the call came, not from Marcus, but from a private number. "Ms. Bennett, this is Victoria Lancaster from the Board of Directors. We need to speak with you." Her tone was crisp, measured, the voice of someone accustomed to wielding authority, but attempting to remain cordial. "Of course," I replied. "When?" "As soon as possible. We'd appreciate a video conference within the hour, if you're available." She wasn't asking. I joined the call wearing a crisp navy blazer, hair pulled back, the same professional appearance I maintained when delivering quarterly IT presentations. 6 board members occupied elegant chairs behind polished walnut tables. At the screen center sat Marcus, resembling a deflated version of himself, collar askew, eyes reddened. His swagger had evaporated. "Olivia," Victoria began. "We understand there's been a disruption to our internal systems." "That's correct," I replied evenly. "And you were the architect behind those systems?" "I was," I confirmed. "For the past 6 years. And per the clause in my executive contract, I had authority to revoke access in the event of wrongful termination, only under specific conditions." "Yes," I said, leaning slightly forward. "One of which was termination without severance." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. I could tell he wanted to interrupt, but he remained silent. He couldn't speak. "And you were offered no severance?" Victoria inquired. "I was not." Marcus summoned me to his office, informed me I was obsolete, and stated he wouldn't spend another cent on me. Silence. Several board members exchanged glances. Someone coughed awkwardly. Victoria turned to Marcus. "Is that accurate?" Marcus cleared his throat. "Look, I didn't think she'd actually," he glanced away. "I didn't review her contract thoroughly. I assumed it was standard boilerplate." I raised my eyebrows. "It wasn't." Victoria inhaled slowly. "So just to clarify, the systems aren't deleted, but access is restricted?" "Correct," I confirmed. "They're secure. No data loss." I followed the protocol exactly as documented. "And what would it take to restore access?" I paused. I wanted to make this unmistakable. Not just for them, but for Marcus. An official retraction of my termination. A signed document acknowledging the breach of contract, and a formal public apology from Mr. Reed. Marcus's head jerked toward the camera. "Are you serious?" "I'm entirely serious," I replied. "You publicly humiliated me. You terminated me without cause, without severance, and without any understanding of the systems I designed. You don't simply get to press reset." Victoria remained quiet momentarily. Then she nodded. "We'll consider your terms." "Thank you, Ms. Bennett." That evening, I took a walk after logging off. The sky hung low with gray clouds, the kind of soft overcast that made streetlights glow like halos. 17 years. That's how long I had devoted to that company, through late nights, system failures, mergers, and crisis mode deadlines. I persevered. I delivered. I never requested more than I earned, and Marcus dismissed all of it with a single sentence. But now he was learning something his father had understood from the beginning: loyalty is earned, not inherited. I didn't want to destroy the company, but I refused to save it at my own expense. And if Marcus insisted on pretending he maintained control, he would watch the entire operation disintegrate without me. Marcus didn't apologize. Not that day. Not the next. Not even after the company's primary clients began withdrawing their contracts. He remained convinced he could resolve it. I heard through a contact in accounting, off the record, naturally, that Marcus had engaged an external IT consultancy. They guaranteed they could regain system access within 72 hours. What they didn't realize was that I had constructed it like a fortress. Not from vindictiveness, but for security, because the systems Nexus Digital relied upon contained sensitive information, legal documents, personnel records, payroll structures, internal audits, client agreements. When Edward granted me complete autonomy, he also trusted me to design protections against breaches. Ironically, I became the breach Marcus hadn't anticipated. By the fourth day, the board faced mounting pressure. Key vendors threatened legal action. The finance department couldn't process invoices, and several government contracts, ones requiring stringent security compliance, were on the verge of cancellation. That evening, my phone rang again. It wasn't Victoria. It was Edward. Yes, Edward Reed, the founder. Marcus's father. Olivia, he said, his voice slower than I remembered, but firm. I've heard what happened. Hello, Mr. Reed, I replied, surprised. I wasn't expecting your call. I should have contacted you sooner. I'd been unwell lately, but Victoria briefed me. I've read everything, including the contract you and I signed. He paused, clearing his throat. I want you to know I stand by that agreement. I granted you that authority because you earned it. And I now see how necessary it was. Thank you, I said softly. That means more than you realize. He hesitated. Would you consider a meeting? Just you and me. No board. No Marcus. I agreed. The following afternoon, we met at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city. He appeared older, frilier, but his eyes remained penetrating. I trusted Marcus to lead with wisdom, he confessed after we were seated. Instead, he led with ego. He looked directly at me. You were the one person I knew would safeguard the foundation of what we built. And now you're the one person who can rescue it. I didn't immediately respond. I watched him sip his tea, the cup trembling slightly in his hands. I'm not asking you to forgive him, he continued. I'm asking if you'll help resolve this for the sake of the company, for the people who still depend on it. My jaw tightened. He called me obsolete before his staff, dismissed me as if I were nothing. If I return, I want it to be meaningful. Edward nodded. I understand. And I believe it's time we discuss that. He slid a document across the table. It was a formal offer, not for reinstatement, but for partnership, co-ownership, permanent rights to the system I developed, public recognition of my contributions to Nexus Digital's growth, and complete authority to oversee the transition to new leadership. Marcus? I inquired, eyebrows raised. We'll be stepping down, Edward said firmly, after the board meeting tomorrow. He doesn't know yet, but it's already in motion. I blinked. And who succeeds him? Edward smiled. We're open to nominations. The implications didn't register immediately, but when they did, I shook my head. I don't aspire to run the company. I didn't say you had to, he replied, but you should help determine who does. That night I examined the documents. Everything was legitimate. The contract was ironclad, and for the first time since walking out of that building, I found peace. But I still had one more decision to make. The next morning, I stood before the board again, this time not as a disgraced employee or desperate contractor. I stood as someone whose value had finally been acknowledged. Marcus was present too. Eyes hollow, shoulders slumped. He remained silent. Victoria addressed me. Olivia? Are you prepared to restore system access? I nodded. Yes. Under one condition, that the entire IT department receives back pay for the hours they'd worked attempting to rectify someone else's mistake, and that every engineer under my former team receives a raise and permanent status. Victoria appeared impressed. Agreed. I accessed the admin panel on my laptop, entered several commands, and initiated execution. The virtual lights flickered on throughout Nexus Digital. The pulse returned. I glanced at Marcus one final time. He avoided eye contact. I didn't need him to look at me. This was no longer his narrative. The system reactivated. Emails flowed. Salaries processed. Clients returned. From the outside, it appeared the storm had passed. But inside me, something lingered. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt powerful. But all I experienced was fatigue. 17 years. 17 years of late nights and early mornings. Of consuming meals at my desk, fixing others' errors, supporting a company that never reciprocated. And when I considered how swiftly Marcus had discarded it all with one sentence, I refused to waste another cent on an obsolete employee. A quiet ache settled behind my ribs. It wasn't about retribution anymore. It was about worth. And how easily the world pretends not to recognize it. I devoted the following week to transitioning the IT infrastructure to a new team, one I personally helped recruit. I no longer wanted my name to be the only one upholding the infrastructure. If I had learned anything, it was this: no one should ever represent a single point of failure, not even me. One afternoon, I found myself back in the old server room. The hum of machinery, the blinking indicators, the faint chill of recycled air, everything exactly as I remembered. Except now I wasn't there to fix anything. I was there to say farewell. Tyler, my former colleague, discovered me there. I heard Marcus vacated the executive suite today, he mentioned quietly. I nodded. About time. He didn't address anyone. Just packed his belongings and left. Did you expect him to? I asked. Tyler shrugged. No. But I hoped perhaps he'd at least say something to you. I don't need his words, I said. He already gave me silence when it mattered. Tyler smiled faintly. You know, we all witnessed what you did. Every single one of us. And we weren't merely impressed. We were proud. That caught me off guard. Proud? Yes, he affirmed. You stood up for all of us. For every employee who's ever been undervalued. For every woman who's ever been told she's just auxiliary. For everyone who's ever been discarded by someone who believed a title conveyed intelligence. I blinked, my throat unexpectedly tightening. You restored our faith, Olivia, he added. I had no response. Just a quiet, grateful smile. That weekend, I visited my parents' graves. I hadn't been in months. They were both educators, modest individuals who believed in effort over ego. When I initially secured the position at Nexus Digital, they celebrated as if I'd won the lottery. When I worked late into the night, they delivered meals. When I was repeatedly overlooked for promotions, they encouraged me to persevere. I settled between the headstones and rested my hands on the grass. I did it, I whispered. Not just for myself. For everyone like me. For every person who was told they were insufficient. For every worker who was dismissed with nothing but an empty container and a forced smile. For every unrecognized genius occupying a back cubicle, ensuring everything functions while someone else claimed the credit. I remained there a while. Just breathing. Listening to the breeze rustling through the trees. Letting the silence envelop me like a protective mantle. The following Monday, I returned to the company one final time. Edward had requested my presence, not for work, but for a formal ceremony. They wanted to honor me. I hesitated, but eventually consented. The entire company gathered in the main atrium. There were speeches, applause, even tears. Then Edward stepped forward. He presented me with a crystal plaque inscribed with gold lettering, "For 17 years of dedication, brilliance, and unshakable integrity, Olivia Bennett." The applause that followed was sustained, thunderous, and sincere. But what moved me most was the procession of employees who waited afterwards simply to shake my hand: young engineers, administrative staff, custodians, managers, individuals from every department. One woman, recently graduated, held my hand slightly longer than the others. "I aspire to be like you someday," she confessed. I smiled. "Then surpass me. Begin with that goal." That night I returned home, lit a candle, prepared some tea, and finally, for the first time in years, I slept without setting an alarm because I knew the company would endure. And more importantly, so would I. 2 months had elapsed since I restored Nexus Digital Systems. Life had normalized, at least superficially. The company operated smoothly again, its future no longer precariously balanced. But Marcus Reed had vanished from the tech sector almost as rapidly as he had stormed into it. Word circulated quickly. Investors withdrew. Clients questioned the company's leadership. Board members whispered about the embarrassment he had caused. And just like that, the golden heir who once smirked at me from behind a walnut desk was gone. No new title, no glossy venture. Just silence. I didn't celebrate. Not publicly. I didn't post about it. I didn't gloat, because I didn't need to. People like Marcus self-destruct without assistance. They believe power is inherited, not earned. They think people are interchangeable. They believe they're immune to failure until they aren't. And when they finally collapse, it's not the sound of impact that resonates. It's the silence afterward. One afternoon, while enjoying coffee in my home office, I received a message from an unexpected source. "It's been a while. May I call you, Marcus?" I stared at the message for an extended period. I didn't owe him anything, but curiosity prevailed. I replied affirmatively. His voice sounded subdued compared to my recollection. No arrogance, no smugness in his tone. Just exhaustion. "I realize I'm probably the last person you wish to hear from," he began. "You're not mistaken," I responded calmly. A pause followed. I allowed the silence to stretch, to sting slightly. I just wanted to acknowledge I was wrong about everything. I didn't reply. I let the quietness extend, let it sting a bit more. "I didn't comprehend what you contributed, how much you sustained. I thought, I don't know, that technology was merely tools. Replaceable. I thought loyalty was optional." "It never was," I finally replied. "I've lost everything," he admitted. "Even my father doesn't return my calls anymore." "That's between you and him," I said. "Not my concern." He sighed. "You needn't forgive me. I just needed to express it." "Then express it clearly." He inhaled deeply. "I apologize, Olivia, for disrespecting you, for underestimating you, for not examining the damn contract. You deserved none of that." I allowed his words to linger momentarily before responding. "Apology accepted," I said, "but don't mistake acceptance for forgetting. I wouldn't dare." And that concluded our conversation. He disconnected. I closed my eyes and released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, not because I needed his apology, but because hearing it reminded me how far I had progressed. Several weeks later, I presided over the ribbon-cutting ceremony for my own company's new headquarters, Bennett Systems. It wasn't ostentatious. No marble floors, no glass partitions. Just functional workspaces, high-performance computers, and a team of brilliant, passionate engineers. Some from my former Nexus team, others recent graduates with eyes full of wonder. I delivered a brief address. Nothing elaborate. Just the truth. "I built my career in the shadows," I stated. "I was labeled just an employee. Overlooked, undervalued, underpaid. But I continued building because I believed in my capabilities, even when others didn't." I paused, surveying the room. "If I've learned one lesson, it's this: your worth isn't determined by who recognizes you. It's determined by what you create, how you present yourself, and how you conduct yourself when no one's observing." The applause that followed wasn't thunderous, but it was authentic. And in that moment, I no longer felt weary. I felt complete. Today I dedicate my time to mentoring young technology professionals. I teach them not merely how to write code, but how to draft contracts. How to protect themselves. How to decline. How to command respect. Nexus Digital continues to exist, though in altered form. Edward quietly retired as a new CEO assumed leadership. A woman named Elise took command. She contacted me for guidance during the transition. I offered one piece of advice: nurture your people, and they'll nurture the company. It's a lesson some never grasp, while for others, it transforms everything. Regarding Marcus, last I heard, he occupied a studio apartment on the city's periphery. No one addresses him as Mr. Reed anymore. And in technology circles, his name rarely emerges in conversation. But mine, it appears on contracts now, on invoices, on systems, on the entrance to a company I established from scratch. Olivia Bennett, not an obsolete employee. Not a forgotten name, but a creator, a champion, a woman who rewrote her own conclusion.